Namaskar and welcome back to Media Scan, your weekend dose of headlines, controversies and perspectives. Viewers, all of this week and even the previous one, there were repeated protests by anti-India elements, Khalistanis in cities of the UK, the US, Canada, even Australia. Government of India has raised the issue with the concerned governments, but at the same time, the alacrity that is shown by some of the Western nations in commenting on our internal politics, why is it not visible when these anti-India elements, the Khalistanis, try to disturb the peace and hold anti-India protests? That is the question on Media Scan for this evening, and we have three very interesting guests to help us understand what's going on. I have here with me Shilkant Sharma, former ambassador, well-known diplomat. He has served the country in various countries of the world, and he will be able to tell us how diplomatically the issue can be tackled, or is it even a problem at all. Also here with me, Jitarth Bhardwaj, well-known journalist. He is editor of the AustraliaToday.com, which has been known to take a very stringent position against all anti-India forces, including these Khalistani elements, and they have faced a lot of threat, a lot of attacks for this. Welcome on Media Scan, Jitarth. Also with me, another guest joining us straight from the US, Ram Prasad, professionally a behavioral expert, but he is known for making his comments very clearly, for speaking his mind in various publications, and a very strong voice on social media as well. Welcome, Ram Prasad. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now, Ambassador Sharma, my first question comes to you, sir. Have you noticed that Government of India, right at the highest, at the Prime Minister's level, has been raising the issue of Khalistani protests, anti-India forces trying to disturb our harmony? It has even led to vandalization in some places and threats. It includes London, various cities of Canada, various places in Australia, of course the US. Why do you think, sir, it is happening? And is the response from Government of India's side not adequate? Or is it that the other nations are giving these forces a free run? Your comment, sir.
I think the basic point is that these governments, by their laxity, are reflecting a certain sense of acquiescing into the political point, the legitimacy, political legitimacy for these terrorist groups and these extremist groups who have no business to be coming in the way of relationship between India and these countries. But this is something which has happened, and we have repeatedly emphasized this point, that these groups should not be allowed. This has been happening for a number of years. There were the Mirpuris who had organized protest against our on the Independence Day against our High Commission in London, and there have been frequent protests, very audacious protests in Canada, in various cities, and the attempt in Washington DC, to deface Mahatma Gandhi's statue and then to attack our embassy, and in Australia again. Now, these are the guys who migrated from India to these countries, Anglophone countries, and they think that they can pursue their cause with complete impunity in these lands, as though India was at loggerheads with these countries. While in fact, we have been working on very good strategic partnerships with all these three countries. So there is a certain thing which is very jarring and upsetting when these Khalistani terrorists are allowed to go there at the High Commission and try to take our flag out. These are the things which are just not acceptable. Imagine the similar thing we allowed to do in the case of UK mission. For instance, when the IRA was raging high, we never allowed anything of that kind. So, each of these countries, there is this fundamental principle of diplomacy that internal affairs of other countries should be left to them, and they should do nothing which would cast an aspersion on the understanding of the internal affairs of another country.
Fine.
Now, if you allow these chaps who have, grievances which are totally unfounded, there was a case where, a legitimate case which was done in the Indian Supreme Court. The Supreme Court decided it. They tried it for 15 years, and then they took a decision. In spite of that, you have these crazy fellows who try to take, sit in judgment on our systems, as though their systems are something very superior. And we know for sure through their own media how full of holes their systems are.
Right. Sir, I'll come back to that, about how they sort of display a sense of entitlement when it comes to, commenting on countries like ours. And also, we would like to understand from you what, as a diplomat, you would suggest that the government of India should do, particularly at a time, at a period when we are emerging as a strong voice of the global south. But before that, please allow me to bring in Ram Prasad here. Ram Prasad, there are two very clear parallel views that are visible in the media. And since this is Media Scan, I would like you to start from the media's take on the issue in your observation. So on the one hand, the understanding is that whatever comments have been made in the past few days, whether it was the German foreign ministry official or it was, a functionary of the US State Department, when anyone in any country of the world is thrust a mic or put a question in a public briefing, they have to give a comment on the situation as per their declared stand. These comments are, they are being said to be very generic in nature, and it is in fact the media which is trying to blow it up and give it various, perspectives and angles. But the other point is, which ministers in the government and other political persons are raising, that a senior Congress leader of the Congress party, Mr. Rahul Gandhi, went abroad. He very clearly sought intervention and tried to involve foreign countries, and this is actually a fallout of that. Where do you think the truth lies?
You are right in the sense that some of these comments appear quite neutral, and you can read any which way you want. For example, one of the Congress leaders thanked Germany and made it sound that the comments were extremely favorable to Mr. Rahul Gandhi, and you can read it however the way that you want. A more appropriate answer could have been that this is an internal matter for India and it is for them to deal with, rather than saying something like we are monitoring and we are watching and we expect standards to be upheld. This also comes in the context of the indictment of the previous US President Donald Trump on what many argue is a relatively small charge. Now, when it comes to that, the commentary from the US government is largely that nobody is above law and the law should take its own course. Now, when it comes to their own internal
so allow me to put a cross question. Why do you think they feel entitled enough or empowered enough to comment on things happening within our country, but when it comes to their own respective countries, they are, very touchy about it, that nobody should cross the line?
Yeah, I mean, if you speak particularly of US, I think they generally have this attitude of world police, right? So that they have some kind of a right to comment about everything else, that they are pivotal, so to speak, to maintain calm and harmony in the world. A lot of people point out the hypocrisy in the way that US kind of reacts. But I think it's beyond that. There is a certain hierarchy that they believe, that they've done so good that they can do some bad and still have the right to comment about every other country.
No, but what about, Ram Prasad, what about media persons, senior activists, even senior politicians, people within the Indian soil who give them an opportunity to make comments about our internal politics, when they go running to them as if, they need help from them because nobody wants to help them here?
So I think this overreaching by media personalities, both in India and the US, is a well-known phenomenon. And I think it's largely because of the politicization of media, where you cannot achieve your objectives electorally, and you're trying to find other ways of achieving those objectives. And you would see a fairly coordinated attempt in the language, in the timing, right, in the kind of positions that they take. It is almost very predictable now. And no wonder trust in media, particularly in the US, is probably at its lowest, because they have seen that interference. Now, if we look at it from a people's perspective, I don't think it makes such a big impact because people take everything with a pinch of salt. But I think this is nothing but many in the media trying to achieve their political objectives and political ends through other means than electorally.
Right. So we will come to that, about how much of attention we should pay to such comments, because it is, after all, the people in the country who are going to decide their own future. But coming to Jitarth here, Jitarth, you know better than us that at the highest political level, PM to PM, the question about vandalization of religious places in Australia and repeated protests has been raised, and the Australian PM was categorical in assuring that he will look into the matter. However, even after that, we have seen reports in the media about protests happening and even small attacks taking place. What exactly is going on in Australia?
See, Australia, if we, let's divide it into two parts, post Prime Minister Elbow visit to India and before that. Okay. So before Prime Minister Modi said what he said in that press conference, everything in Australia was different, I can tell you. There were a number of complaints. There were police complaints. There were vandalism happening in the temples. Threatening calls were done to temple priests, management committee. Common people were targeted, their business was targeted, posters were laid on their business or homes. All this was happening, and apathy of the local political and administrative system was that they were doing nothing, as if nothing is happening. Okay. So all that has changed after Prime Minister Modi requested Prime Minister Elbow that please look into this, and rightly so, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese had assured, and he has not only assured, now we can see some work happening on the ground also. ASIO, which is the security agency here, AFP, Australian Federal Police, they are actively tracing these elements. I mean, I can tell you the difference what was 15 days back and today. Today, these Khalistani elements are hesitant to go on the street. They are hesitant to do their whatever protests you want to call them. If they are hesitant to that, and they were drawing.
So what you are saying, Jitarth, if I gather you correctly, you are saying that there may be a stray report here and there, but substantively, the intervention at the top political level has certainly brought a change, at least on the ground there, even if not a change in the political perspective.
See, political perspective also changes as something comes from authority like Prime Minister. Everyone, even the state premiers and state police or council, everyone has to listen. They look at it very clearly. And there is an administrative system, just like in India. They are told to react to certain issues differently. And it was in Brisbane. I mean, when the referendum, their so-called Khalistan referendum was happening in Melbourne, police and authorities were not responding at all. Khalistanis were running amok on the streets.
So, Jitarth, just one quick question. Is the Indian community feeling safer now about their own security, about their religious places, about their homes and their families?
I mean, it will be too early to comment on that, but yes, they are being, at least they are being reassured by police officers. They are being reassured by as big as Home Affairs Minister of Australia. She visited a couple of temples and reassured them that your safety and security is primary responsibility of ours, and we will not let anybody target you.
Fine,
So
fine.
is
Those are very reassuring comments from you, Jitarth. And since you yourself have faced the brunt of the threat from these Khalistani elements directly on your publication as well as yourself, we wish you all the best. And I'll come back to you on that question. But can I bring in Ambassador Sharma here? Sir, you have heard from Jitarth, and we have seen it happening in the case of London. When there are clear messages from the political establishment, such as with the symbolic move of removing the barricades from the High Commission here in New Delhi, or as you said, raising it at the highest level with Prime Minister Albanese, we see that change does reflect on the ground. Do you think Indian government needs to get tougher on these protests? Or do you think these are just innocuous protests and it doesn't affect our security either way?
No, these protests cannot be or should not be dismissed lightly. Because one fact which we must all realize is that these countries like UK, for instance, the state is very powerful. It's not a state which is soft state there. And same applies to Australia. There the state is strong, So if they decide to do something, it can happen. So if nothing happens, that means there is someone in their establishment who is trying to weaken the resolve of the state to deal with these extremists and these troublemakers and these totally what they call unacceptable activities to prevent them.
In that case, sir, may I ask you, sir, as you said that, in strong governments, whenever they want, they can actually take action.
Yes.
Would that mean that countries like the US, the UK, even Australia, who are our partners in every way, particularly in geostrategy, why would they like to promote elements who want the division of our country?
Well, you can see this in terms of their internal political dynamic. In UK, there are these forces which get them elected, and there's support given to, like Pakistan inspired, these Mirpuris are very, active there, and Pakistan diaspora is active there, and the ISI works on them. They've also nabbed some of our Sikh friends also in this process. And it is not to say that all Sikhs in UK or USA are to sympathize with the Khalistanis, but they managed to get hold of a few. And the tragedy is that just a handful of them, if they are not restrained, they can create violence, and violence attracts attention. And that is their purpose. Their purpose is to attack soft targets, attract attention, and and drive a wedge between India and these countries. This is their purpose. This is Pakistan's purpose. Pakistan's unrelenting pursuit throughout its 75 years has been to drive a wedge between India's relations with these countries.
And so since they are unable to do much on Kashmir, I think they have tried to shift their attention to this Khalistani project, which is not taking off at all. Sir, allow me to bring in Ram Prasad back into the discussion. Ram Prasad, there are various theories going on in the media, among the writers and commentators. One theory, as you said, is because Pakistan has been trying relentlessly to, break our country, and there are elements in countries like the UK, the US, Canada, certainly, who have people within the establishment there who get influenced by them. The other theory that is going on, which also may not be completely off the mark, is because India has maintained a fiercely independent stance on the Ukraine situation, and we have not toed the line of the West. Therefore, they are not too keen to control these elements. You have seen protests happening in the US as well, in your neighboring Canada too. How would you like to see the situation?
Yeah, I think on one end we see US getting closer to India in terms of manufacturing of certain things, including chips and several other moves. You also have this very carrot and stick kind of an approach where, like you rightly pointed out, there are some soft sanctions, so to speak, delays in visas and some of these commentary, both on some of the internal politics and the Khalistan issue. Many would argue that the American media is some kind of an extension of the American state, and they tend to kind of take that position. And time again, US administrations take this view that some are favorable administrations and some are not. I think it's quite obvious that they are not fully in favor of the current government. I think they're stuck in the situation that they need India, but they do not like the party that is in power. And therefore, you see this very mixed kind of reaction. On one end, they tend to be quite positive, on the other end, a little bit negative. On the Khalistan issue, I think the US reaction to some of the violence, particularly in San Francisco, was, I thought, much stronger than how UK kind of reacted. But when you see commentary in media, when it comes to creating divisions in people, I think American media is the best. I mean, people in this country cannot agree on any important issue. And that's how incentives are kind of organized. And even when you see the Khalistan issue, they try to frame it as a Hindu versus Sikh issue, whereas in reality, it is Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, Jain versus Khalistanis, right? So it's not a Hindu-Sikh issue, but the current commentary is very Hindu-Sikh. And I think they're all on this narrative about Hindu and Hindutva.
So how is the Indian community engaging with the media to clarify this position, that this is not a Hindu-Muslim conflict. It's Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, Christians, everybody against the unity of India.
Yes, and I think that's a good question. There are, several organizations that are trying to engage with them, but media in this country, more so than many other countries, stays in a bubble. I think they're somehow immune to all these concepts. Like the ambassador said, we cannot take some of these protests lightly. There is a very violent past to what Khalistanis have done and could do. And oftentimes this is dismissed as a democratic kind of a protest, but there are real dangers. So I think this media being in a bubble and being immune to any feedback is kind of quite dangerous. Especially when public memories are shot.
Okay.
I don't think many of the
Mr. Prasad, I think I am sure you have much more to share with us on that, but we'll come back to you in another episode and try to see what more can be done by the Indian community as well as the government. But allow me to bring in Jitarth quickly because I have very little time left with me on the show. Jitarth, very quickly, what Mr. Prasad said is also my next question. In various countries, whether in the Western world or in other places, whenever there is an anti-India protest, the argument that is put forward is that, these countries are free countries. They cannot stop any peaceful protests from happening. However, the problem is that these so-called peaceful protests are actually demanding the breakup of the Indian nation, and they are creating communal tension between communities. How can you have said how the government has managed to change the situation, but how can the community engage with the media in that country or the other elements in order to put the picture straight?
See, Smita, all these Western countries have thrived on getting this demonstration from ethnic communities of different countries, may it be Iran, Korea, or China, or Baltic countries, or Russia. They will encourage the diaspora from these countries to do protest, and they will give them donations, grants, education.
But why?
So this is their modus operandi to keep pressure on these countries. And now, because India is coming out of those shadows of olden times, they are still not understanding whether they have to let it go or they have to stop. If America requests Canada to catch one of the highest authority in one of the business of China, Canada next second arrests her. If India requests Canada to arrest one of the culprit in XYZ violence in India, they don't even listen to us. So these are different methodologies these countries apply to different countries. Now, as India is getting more power in terms of economic strength and political and geopolitical strength, probably as Australia has listened to India, other countries they are reluctant to comment on Indian issues. That much you can see right now. But to take swift action, that probably will take another 4 or 5 years. And I can see in 2026 somewhere you will be saying, look, now these countries take swift action. And that comes
So I'll
with
take your word on that, Jitarth, and I'll come back to you surely. Don't forget, we will see how it goes. Hopefully it won't take so many years. It will take less than that. But on that point, I'm afraid I shall have to wind up this conversation because I've totally run out of time. Thank you, Jitarth, for sharing that perspective. And also thank you very much to Mr. Ram Prasad connecting to us straight from the US despite the wide time difference. Also grateful to Ambassador Sharma for joining us at a very short notice and being so candid in sharing his views with us. Thank you all of you gentlemen, and I shall get back to all of you once again and as we see how the situation progresses.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Viewers, our experts had different views on how to tackle the situation, but if there was one thing on which all of them agreed, that was the world will not start respecting you unless you make yourself respectful by becoming strong, by making your voice heard. That thankfully seems to be happening in various parts of the world as we see in Australia. So India needs to make its point clearer at the government level, at the people-to-people level, at the media level. And then we may not see what we are seeing in some cities of the world, that is forces getting a free run against our country. On that, it's a wrap up on Media Scan for this weekend. See you again next weekend. Namaskar.